So the big story in the news today was about Joe Biden, some racially sensitive comments he made on a radio show. I'll paraphrase it. I don't remember the exact words, but he was talking to a black. It was a hip hop station in New York, so he was talking to one of the black DJs. And as the segment was ending, he said something along the lines of, if you were to vote for Trump over Joe Biden, you ain't black, right? So implying that no black person could ever vote for Trump. You're not a real black person if you vote for Trump, what have you. So that was a big story. And you hear a story like that, and I feel like you go through kind of a sequence of events, or at least most people do to some extent. Most people that are trying to look at it kind of rationally, objectively. And your first thought might be, well, he's not wrong totally, right? Now, depending on your views on Trump, whether you believe there's certain policies and things he implemented that directly harmed, African-American people and minorities, or even if it's just indirectly, right? Just him becoming president and certain groups that support him have felt emboldened, and it definitely seems to be more hate around, right? If not his fault, indirectly, whatever. So however you look at it, you could probably rationally come to a conclusion that says, yeah, it's probably not the best thing to have Trump in office for minorities. But then you quickly kind of move to the second phase of it where you say, well, no, that's not right. I mean, maybe that's true for a lot of people, but that doesn't make it a rule. When you make that a rule, as Joe Biden kind of called it out, it's offensive almost. It's you don't have a thought in this. You don't get to think about it yourself. You just kind of do what you're supposed to do. You do what you're told, kind of thing. You could interpret it that way, but it has that in it, and it's wrong, right? It's not something that should be said. If the point behind it was different, I get it, but you said it, in a way in which you can't say it that way, and it's not okay. So you get to that view, and then you realize there's the level of hypocrisy in it, though, right? Okay, so this is bad. This is something that shouldn't have been said, and then you look to see, and this cuts both ways. This example just happens to be Joe Biden, but you could do the same scenario for something Trump said and his supporters. But so Biden says something like this. And based on the standards and the value system and all that seems to be in place from the liberal side, that type of comment shouldn't be okay, right? If Trump were to say it, if other people were to say it, rightfully so, they would be called out and they would be criticized and there would be an issue, as you would say there should be, because it's an offensive comment. But when it's their side, when it's their team in this scenario, you let it slide. You justify away, you make excuses, for all the reasons we always talk about it, how the brains are imperfect and the flaws of thinking and the identities, how they play in and biases, etc. And you say, no, it's not that bad, that's not what he meant, and you let it slide. And you let it slide because you think it's for the greater good, and he's your guy, and he's a good guy, at the end of it, right? That's your thought process. Your thought process is, I trust that this person is good, these people that are, being put in these positions. So I'm gonna let it slide. I'm gonna pretend it wasn't that big of an issue. So that's obviously hypocritical, right? And that's problematic because hypocrisy is irrational, and it doesn't make for a good way to apply or approach problems if you do it inconsistently. So that's a problem in and of itself. But then you get to the last phase, which is, what's the implication of that? What's the implication of these scenarios happening? And again, it's either side. You could take Republicans and conservative media when Trump does certain things or when certain decisions are made that maybe aren't the best decisions, and they'll support it the same and they'll be okay with it. But if the other side did it, it would be an issue, right? So what's the implication of that? Well, ironically, the implication is, because we keep letting people slide, as long as they line up with what we think they should be and they're on our team, we keep letting things slide and keep letting these flaws and these faults go by. And the quality of leaders that are rising in these parties just keeps going down and down and down, because as you go through what should be a natural filtration process, whereas you start to see how they think more and maybe the flaws in their thinking and some biases they hold, and that they're not able to think quickly on their feet or think critically or whatever it is, whatever the issue is, you don't see that. You don't acknowledge that in how you handle it. And then as a result, those people keep moving forward. And you almost start to filter out people who are more self-aware and who are more willing to say, hey, I messed up, because you can't show any weakness. So you almost filter the good people out and you retain the bad people, frankly. So it really is a huge problem by continuing to allow it, right? It's got to stop at some point. At some point, somebody has to put a stop to it and say, it's not okay. I don't care if it's my team or their team. Almost more so when I said a bit ago, it's ironic that the implication is it makes the quality of our leaders worse. It's ironic because the objective is we believe they're good. So that's why we're letting them slide, because we believe, I don't know, it's for the greater good. There's some good to come out of it. But the reality is, and the irony is, it's the opposite. Because of the system we're using to assess them, because of the way we keep letting them slide and let them skate by and no big deal, he didn't mean it, when it's our side, it makes our side worse. It then forces their side to do it, and their side gets worse, and however you want to look at it, in whatever scenario it is, everybody's getting worse. So again, I think the simple explanation here is when you recognize something in that second, third phase of the process I just spoke about, and you know it's wrong, it's clearly, it shouldn't have been said, right? Or whatever the action was. There's clearly some issues in how it was done. Just stick to that. Just stick to that. Force yourself. Use that as the instrument if that kind of situation comes up to really check your thinking. It may be a little bit of a long-term game, right? There's probably some short-term hiccups that come with this of trying to explain to your base or whatever it might be that you're defending the other side, or the media is kind of switching their views a little. But in the long term, we will all be much, much, much better off.